Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Mic Drop, the Music News Blitz podcast. Today, I'm your host, Nisha, and I'm joined with Will and Katie, and we have some super interesting topics to talk about. So I'm going to start off today with the kind of idea and of concept albums. So a concept album is an album that tells a story throughout the songs. For me, the first concept album I kind of remember listening to and being like, "Oh, there's a story here," was Melanie Martinez's "Crybaby," um, and that just stood out to me as like, "Oh, this is actually a story," and each song kind of links to the next. I think concept albums are great. I've spoken about on the podcast before that like that albums are really important to me, as like full bodies of work, and I think when they have a story, it's just really cool. My personal favorite would be Tyler the Creator's Goblin. Um, he basically the songs on it are kind of um like him speaking to a therapist, which is also him, but he's basically speaking to a therapist, and he's basically quite insane. Like what he talks about isn't really nice, but I think the music is really great. So I suppose I'll ask you guys: do you have any favorite concept albums?
I would say Kate Bush Hounds of Love, the second side of that is called The Ninth Wave, and that kind of tells the story of a woman who's blown overboard a boat during a storm and is just floating in the sea with a little life jacket on her own. And it's kind of all the thoughts she has while she's just stuck there. She sees like going back to her family, imagining how they react to her death, all that kind of stuff. And I just think it's really beautiful and really engaging as well, and just a really like eerie but beautiful story. So I think that would be my favorite.
Yeah, I think for me, my favorite is To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. It's just the one that stands out. And as you listen to the album, you hear little snippets of Kendrick speaking to his idol. And then when you come to the very end of the album, you hear almost this full conversation. And throughout the album, he's exploring like the themes of like growing up and with having his black history and growing up with that, but also to not leave his roots behind, but that struggle that he's having with fame. And to me, in terms of a concept album, that's what stands out to me and probably my favorite that I've listened to.
Yeah, I think Kendrick is really good at doing a concept album. Like even Good Kid, Mad City, like he plays that kind of role really well, and I think that's a really great one. But speaking of concept albums, Katie is going to talk about Mitski's new album, which is actually a concept album. So Katie, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been a bit on the fence for Mitski. I've never been like the biggest fan. I've always thought she's really, really good, but I just haven't necessarily been massively into the music. But because she's such a big and important artist, I was like, I should give this new album a listen. Listened to it, didn't like it, and then for some reason listened to it again, and I was like, oh my god, there's just so much in this I missed. And I think it's one of those albums where not every song in it is like nice to listen to, but in some ways that's kind of the point. Um, it's about this woman who's just alone with her thoughts, really, in this like crumbling house that's sort of meant to reflect her mental state in a way. And I just thought it's a really like suffocating album, but it's just so beautiful. There's one song in it I particularly like called Dead Woman, and it's about how women often get romanticized after their death. There's like references to Sylvia Plath and people like that who have kind of been like mythologized through their death in the end. And it's just the lyrics in it are just so powerful, and the chords as well. They don't really root you in a key at any point, so it's just like this really slightly unsettling sound. And I just think it's maybe one of the best songs I've heard this year, even though I wasn't really a fan of it when I first listened to it.
I think that's like a perfect kind of representation that you kind of need to give things a chance, and
Definitely.
that there's levels to things usually. Me personally, I've never really gotten into Mitski, and I think she's kind of unavoidable in a way, and I think I need to take that leap and start listening to her a bit more in depth. But what about you, Will? Do you like
I
Mitski? What? What's your
I've
opinion?
I've explored her music in the past, and I think this is a common theme with a lot of her fan base over time of her music is really upsetting. And for a lot of people, I think for myself, not that I've grown out of it, but it's also I can see why it resonates with people, but it's also something I kind of don't want in my life. But I can see why people listen to that music, why people enjoy it. But I remember listening to Be the Cowboy and The Landers Inhospitable and So Are We when they first came out. But now when I'm looking at like myself now, I just haven't listened to her music recently. Maybe it's something I have to check out, but it's not quite the vibe I want to go for, if that makes sense.
No,
It
that
is,
does make a lot of sense.
yeah,
And Katie, you love your sort of sad music.
I
So
do. I'm a big fan, but I mean, she is kind of like the saddest of the saddest, really. And it's obviously it's not always easy stuff to listen to in terms of themes, but also just the music itself. It's not always written to sound nice. So I think getting through that barrier, sometimes I'm like, oh my god, like what is this? Like you can sing, why are you choosing to sing like that? But I do think there's a lot of depth to it, and particularly to this new album that I do enjoy.
Yeah, and I feel like we kind of explored that when we talked about Pivots by Ethel Keane a couple of weeks ago, and kind of how this unsettling vibe can also bring about really good music because of how on edge it places you. And I guess that same concept can be applied to Mitski's album here.
Definitely, yeah.
I feel the same way about because I was doing a bit of research on albums that were like concept albums, and Kid A by Radiohead came up. And I get that feeling with Radiohead where I'm just like, this induces anxiety in me, but like I'm enjoying it for some reason, but I feel on edge.
Definitely. I'm like that with Radiohead. Again, sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I'm actually enjoying listening to this, but I can acknowledge that it's really powerful music. It's just, you know, a bit hard sometimes.
Yeah. So Will is gonna chat to us about SNL UK and what it means for British musicians. And yeah, Will, take it away.
Yeah, so the first episode just aired literally last Saturday, and we saw Wet Leg. They were the first musical guest, and over the next couple of weeks we've got Wolf Alice this coming Saturday, and the week after we've got Kasabian. But in the grand scheme of things, having a live show that obviously primarily sketch comedy, but also has a musical guest at the end. We've seen SNL in the US go on for 50 years and it's seen major names, but it's also seen smaller names that people might get introduced to because of the show. And having having a massive backing and a massive following, a lot of people will get introduced to new artists, and specifically with the UK, it's British artists. We've talked about this before with the Brits. Having a platform for British artists all over the country is very important, and having SNL UK just gives another outlet for upcoming artists and bands to be able to get placed on like a prime time live slot to for new fans and for people to enjoy who already enjoy their music to hear it live for the first time. So I think it could just be really good for the industry as a whole, especially with British music.
I think it's a definitely a new way for people to see music. I actually didn't see the performance, so what was that like if you did
It
see it?
it was it was really good because well, like I feel like they're already kind of defined within British music. Like they have their place, people know them, but just seeing them live and also interacting with the crowd, it's just something that you wouldn't typically see at concerts or even smaller venues. I think at one point she goes in to sit with the crowd and almost perform a little sketch there. So I think it's really important to almost have that interactivity as because you almost see the personality of the band or the artist performing as well as hear their music for what it is.
Yeah, I think that is really important. Katie, what do you think about that?
I agree. I think it's a way to keep live music in the foreground as well, because obviously it's an industry that has struggled at times, and I think if you make it such a big cult thing, then it's a way to keep the focus there. I've not actually ever seen SNL, but it kind of reminds me a bit the way you talk about it of watching Blue Peter when I was little, and they'd always have like a band on at the end. It gives that kind of feel of just excitement to see live music, really.
So obviously the next two artists are already announced, but do you guys
Yes.
have anyone you kind of
Oh.
hope to see on it?
Oh, I have no idea. I've actually not thought about this.
Any predictions maybe of who we might see?
I think in terms of predictions, I feel like as being a startup show, I feel like they're gonna try and go for the big names.
Mm,
And maybe later down the line, once it's like solidified within the industry, then it will give small artists a chance to get to the stage. But at first, you got to build up the crowd and the audience that will watch it week in and week out.
I think
yeah.
it's
So I think maybe we could see like a Raye or an Olivia Dean, like those big British names we already know about, but are amazing live.
Those were the two I was gonna guess that are gonna be on it.
Yeah. I think they like the big names, and Ray's album has just came out, so I feel like it's almost perfect timing. So who
Yeah.
knows, we could see them in following weeks, and that could be something that the British public could really look out for.
I could see maybe Sam Fender being on it, maybe. Potentially.
Well, I feel like SNL in the US has also been a place of comeback, maybe. So maybe we could see returning artists or older artists that we've not known. Like they might just do this one-off two-song performance and just disappear again. But for those fans to almost have that audience be completely shocked. So I think yeah, you could see older artists as well as new artists come through.
Katie, do you have any predictions or kind of a wish list of who might be on it?
I have a feeling, and I don't know why I have this feeling, but I think when they've got some of the bigger names done, I think, have either of you heard of Florence Road? They're like an upcoming all-girl band, but I just have a feeling that they might be finding their way on there. I feel like they're kind of making those steps at the moment, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah,
But
I'd love that.
But yeah, I think it's a platform for the artists to get their name out there, but it's also for their message as well. So it works hand in hand for everyone.
Mm.
But I think that is a good place to end it. If anyone has any ideas, you can leave it in the comments on who you think might be on SNL. Or if you have a favorite concept album. But we also have a website, Music News Blitz. Make sure to check it out. We have so many amazing writers writing articles every week. So make sure to check it out. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week for the next episode.
Yeah,
Bye.
Bye.